Since the morning, we've discussed about the development of football. We've discussed about the future of football. We've discussed about the development of youth in football. Now it's time to discuss the women in football. That is what our next topic is, Women Football Report from Ground Zero. Before I introduce the moderator for this session, I would like Patricia Rodriguez to come on the stage, and I would also like Anthony Andrews to join us on the stage. The moderator for this session is Fiona Green, who is a member of the Sports Industry Advisory Group for the UK Department for International Trade, founder and CEO of Winners. She is also the author of Winning with Data, a best-selling book and e-learning course. We had you as a panelist yesterday, Fiona, and today we have you as a moderator. I can't wait to listen to what this session has to offer.
Yes, firstly, I want to say thank you to everybody who has joined us.
And we can hear you loud and clear. Thank you. Over to you, Fiona.
Excellent, thank you very much. Well, firstly, thank you to everybody who's joined us at this conference and today in this panel when we're going to speak about women's football and indeed women in football. We were also going to be joined by Kate Hodgkinson from the Premier League, but because of the time delay, she's unfortunately had to back out. But she has wished you all luck, hopes you enjoy the session, and has offered to support next year. So she does hope to come and join you in 2023. So you have two panelists who are with you in person, Anthony and Patricia, and we have Emma and Natalia with us on the screen. We're going to ask them to introduce themselves shortly, but to ensure we make the most of time, I'll ask each of them a question and they can introduce themselves within that. Now, we're going to be covering both the participation of women's football and the business side of women's football, as well as Patricia, who's going to talk to us about actually being a woman in football. But without further ado, let's start off with a question to you, Anthony. So if you'd like to introduce yourself, but then tell us about the key differences in your approach to training the men's and the women's game, because of course you've been fortunate enough to coach and train on both sides. Thank you.
Hi, Green. Thank you for the question. So you know me very well. My name is Anthony Andrews. I'm currently working as the first team assistant coach for Gokulam Kerala FC. Thank you for the lovely question, Green. Considering the men's and women's football, I think this football, like the game is same. The football expects are more or less than the same. The major difference that arises in the women football is psychologically. If you see, can you hear me? Hello. The major differences arises due to psychological, because the women's football, the goals for the women's football is not specific, instead copied from the men's game. As we coaches need to factor differences such as their strength, size, physical aspect, speed in the player's development. There are few specific peculiarities in the women's development where, as a coach, you might not make difference in the men's game. Their physical health is different, and that should be taken into consideration while we training or in the match. Females are more prone to ACL injuries. Their hips are little heavier, their chest are a little heavier, and that should also be taken into consideration. We should also keep a track on the menstrual cycle and keep the documentation for every month. At the same time, we need to have a lot of experts in the team who is very good, like psychologist, fitness coach, you can say nutrition. All these players, coaches, all plays very, very vital role in the women's team. In the subjective, I would say it is easier to build discipline teamwork, team spirit in the women's development.
Thank you, Anthony. Some fascinating insights there. Natalia, I'm going to come over to you now, please. Firstly, can you introduce your role over at Valencia? Perhaps you might have some feedback on Anthony's comments, but also tell us a bit about the setup between the men's and the women's team at your own club. Thank you very much.
First of all, thank you so much. My name is Natalia from Spain. I'm a work pro coach. Right now, currently working in the research team of Valencia CF Women. I would like to talk a little bit about the structure of our academy because until now, during the last 11 years ago, we were working a little bit separated of the men, but from the last season in 2022, for example, we start to work integrated inside of the bigger structure. That was a lot of change in our routine, in our normal day, because we start to grow. We start to train also in the sport facility of Valencia CF, working through the Valencia CF of methodology, getting tools to develop our own coaches until local and other community coaches, professional coaches, and focus on the high performance structure, and that's going out supporting the growth of our girls inside of the club. So that's, I think, that we took a big difference between the both academy, men's and women, but right now we are working with the same master plan per categories, where we are integrating boys and girls in the same development program. And each development stage or each development phase have a specific content adapted to the growth of the footballer and also to taking the philosophy of Valencia CF in the proper way. So I think that in the top, talking about the first women's team and the first boys men's team, there are too much different because we are in the different moment. But right now in the academy, we are running to get less steps between us, and also to run in the same direction.
Excellent.
I can say also, which is I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Okay, yes, of course, we are. I wanted to explain you, which is the situation right now with the different teams, because we have 7 teams playing women, so girls and women, 2 players with under 12, and they are also competing against boys. So this is the world team for women, but they are playing against boys in the regional league. And then we have in the other side playing 11v11. One team we are playing under 16, under 18. Then we have the reserve team, and everything or this kind of team are working in the same pace, because the most important thing is to develop the player, to push or to grow, so to promote in our academy, to put in the top of the first team. And I think that we are really close of the men, like a football, so we are thinking in the same direction.
So clearly much more advanced than perhaps some of the teams are in India. We'll come back to discuss more of that, Natalia, shortly. But I'd like to go over to Emma now, please, Emma. And after introducing yourself, we've just been talking about the differences and similarities between the men's and the women's game. And it wasn't too long ago that we would have talked about the difference in the men's and women's when it comes to the European Championships. But you've just come off the Women's European Championships this year. Why don't you tell us a bit about that experience? And were there any differences?
Hi, hello everybody. Hi Fiona. Thank you very much for having me this evening. My name's Emma. I look after UEFA's strategy for women's football. And Fiona's right, we've just had a fantastic summer, fantastic year for women's football. I hope that many of you that are in the audience today got a chance to watch that. From my perspective, my main role at the Women's Euros very much about legacy and looking after the legacy of the tournament, because hosting any tournament is just a massive opportunity. And I know that in India you're hosting the World Cup, the Youth World Cup very soon, and that's a massive opportunity for you as well. The ripple effect around the Women's Euro has just been huge. We're still smiling at the success of it all. But in reality, legacy does start many years before the tournament. And you can create a legacy for any level of competition as long as it's targeted. We have legacy programs at UEFA for our youth competitions, for the Women's Champions League. And there are always these advances and changes in infrastructure, organizational capacity, coaching development, etc. In a few days, we'll be releasing the report of the Women's Euro that will showcase the first findings. But I think from my perspective, the opportunities that we've seen is that playing opportunities that we've been able to provide to women and girls across England who may never have played before. So I think we've managed to get over 400,000 playing opportunities throughout the tournament, and that means that we've got around 8,000 new girls and women registered to play, which for me is one of the main reasons to drive forward the work of the women's game. But you can also see now in the Women's Super League that there are, sold out stadiums, season ticket sales have doubled at Chelsea and Arsenal. They've sold out. This was not happening 1 year ago. It's made such a huge difference to the perception of the game. And I think that's really where your tournament in India, the Women's Under-17, will have a lasting legacy, because it will be able to shift the perception of women and girls playing football in your country, because you have the opportunity to increase the visibility of your young talents, not just the ones in all the teams, but most importantly, young Indian women playing football who have an opportunity to shine and to inspire others as well.
That's fantastic, Emma. Firstly, I can't wait to see that report come out. To everybody in the room, please look out for that report to come out of UEFA later this week. I am going to come back to address the opportunity that comes with hosting the FIFA Under-17 Women's World Cup. But for now, I'm just going to move over to Patricia. Patricia, you've kindly offered to talk about the importance of diversity. And if you look at this panel today, out of the 4 experts, 75% are female. Out of the total participants in the panel, 80% are female. Why don't you talk us a little bit more, as a female operating in football, how important this diversity is?
Hello. I think today we can, it's not negotiable to talk about diversity or equality. It's mandatory to have equality and diversity in our society to evolve as a society. So for that, we need women in decision-making positions, in top positions, leading ligas, leading federations, leading companies, and we need to work together for that, for having a more balanced society, for the decision-taking process, having all the feelings and the situations that we can find in our society. So I think that education is key for that. And I have noted a great evolution since I started working in football industry in 2014. Because my own experience is that when I applied to a position to be the finance manager in that moment, in 2014, the first thought that I had in that moment that it was not be elected because I was a woman. So I think that situation now is a little bit different, and step by step we have more women working in football and in other industries, in sport industries. So I think the next step could be having decision-making positions, top positions, to change and to complete this change.
So, Patricia, another question on this. So, what you've mentioned, you have seen significant changes, but for example, in your country, in your home country, how well has this been adapted or adopted, should I say? How well has this need for inclusion of more females in decision-making positions been adapted? You're from Italy, is that right? Why don't you tell us a bit about how this has been accepted in Italy?
For example, when I started working in football 2 years later, in 2016, I was appointed as general manager, and in that moment I was the first woman as a first division football club general manager. So now we are more women in that kind of positions, and also in positions like marketing director or like finance director, and also in La Liga, in the directors committee, there are more women. In Spain, we have also the Women's Liga. It's professionalized this year, but we have a professional league for women. So I think that we are making some steps to achieve that equality, but we need to improve. We need to continue working on that to improve and to achieve the fully equality.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Anthony, we're going to come over to you now. Emma just talked about the European Championships, and more importantly, your country's hosting of the Under-17s Women's World Cup next month. Tell us a bit about your thoughts on how your club, how Kerala FC will benefit, and what strategies will you put in place to ensure that you benefit?
Yes, the sports will
We can hear you, Anthony.
Thank you. Yes, the sports will definitely help us. Is it audible? Yes, the sports will definitely help us because a lot of young players will be watching this game and will try to take up this sports. But as if you ask me about Gokulam will be watching all the matches, and we will try to find potential players who will fix into our club. And at the same time, one of our players is also in the national team, who's with the World Cup squad. We will be keeping eye on her as well, and we will try to support the Women's World Cup.
Thank you. So that's very much about how you bolster your playing teams through the participation of the World Cup. But Emma also talked about the impact on the business side, for example, an increase in season tickets. Let's come over to you, Natalia, please, because Valencia's women's team have done very well recently. Haven't you recently won and also qualified? You won the UEFA U19s and were a finalist in the U17s. What impact have these successes had on Valencia?
I think that this kind of champion of major tournament is enormous. It's amazing the impact that they create in the society, in the club, in the federation, also in the street, you know. But we must take advantage in this way of big success in Spain women's teams to promote and to boost the growth of women's football by attracting new young girls, improving the environment where the players are training, improving the reality that the different teams or clubs have in their daily. So the most important thing is close of this tournament, we get the little player has a reference. For example, when you are talking, when you are watching telling you say, I want to be an Nadal. Now we have a lot of players telling us, I want to be Alexia Putellas. So that's amazing. That is the first step in the road where we are working, because it's the most important. You know, you need to have a reference to start to work with yourself to put in the society. So I think that's amazing. We need to fight for that. and we try to do in all daily training sessions, talking about the different things, the different environment, not just in Spain, it's not in the community, in Europe, and also after the last championship in the World Cup under 20. So that's unbelievable for us.
So, again, Emma brought up the difference between the commercial impact as a result of a major tournament. Valencia, how closely do the business side of the club work with the performance side to ensure that what you're doing with the women's team is being felt by or being benefited by the commercial team?
Yeah, I think that we have two big teams of two big points of view inside of the business and inside of performance. Right now, as one partner said, we are working to professionalize the league. So that's one big step for Valencia CF because we are playing in this league. So that are taking some helpful to grow fast, to grow the academy, to grow the fields where they are working. And also the second point of view is the social impact. We need to get more media channels to show the support, which kind of football we are, which kind of development we have. And also the men, this kind of thing have really nice because the men's football has the best platform in the world to show its media content. This leads to getting rich advertising brands to boost the business. So this kind of things are trying to change here, getting better sponsors, getting a sponsor that indirectly help us to grow as a club. Something like a sponsor to health, fitness, something to rental cars, something like putting every single one of the performance of the club.
Thank you very much indeed. Emma, I'm going to come over to you now, please. You've just heard Natalia talk about the way the club is structured for both the men's and the women's game. What would you say, what do you feel about the impact that the infrastructure of the women's game has within a club? Sorry, what is the impact of the way the women's team is set up within the infrastructure of a club? What impact can it make?
I mean, first of all, I think when we look at this point, it's actually quite structural, cultural, and developmental. So the structures of women's football are professionalizing at such a rate in some countries towards more integrated structures, where there is more like Valencia, where there is a marrying between male and women's sections within one club. And in other parts of the world, standalone women's football clubs are developing at a faster rate. So there's not, I would be very careful in saying there was one size fits all. Although we do in Europe, so I'll talk about Europe because that's what I know the most, we do see that there is this trend towards a more integrated structure between men's and women's clubs structures. So at the moment it's around 50-50 across the top division women's clubs in Europe if they are integrated with a men's club, but that has been increasing year on year. UEFA is encouraging that there is more synergies between men's and women's football, particularly through the club licensing. It's now, there's some mandatory provisions in men's licensing in order to have support for women's football, which is new as of next season, which is an exciting development for us. But what's really important is a few things really. One is to kind of enhance, where there is synergies to enhance, that those are enhanced across the game. We did a recent survey which kind of suggests that most synergies come from an infrastructure point of view and not necessarily a capacity point of view in terms of the knowledge that sits within a club as a whole. So that would be particularly for the marketing teams or the technical teams. Actually, there is least exchange of knowledge we found within technical teams across clubs than any other area. So that's something that I think is really important to improve, because if there are people, sorry Fiona, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, because that was a fascinating point. Why do you think that is the case? Why do you think there is the least exchange of technical knowledge? What do you think that boils down to? Don't tell me the men want to keep the secrets to themselves. Anthony, please tell me that's not the case.
I'm not sure. Maybe it's to do with the structures and Natalia probably has more insight into how the club works in this way than I do. It could be to do with locations of where staff are or the timetabling, also the pressures that they're under from a different perspective. But this is what we found, which is converse to other sports such as rugby, where the biggest exchange is actually at the coaching level and least on the business perspective. So it seems that it's something quite specific to football. But I think one of the other things that we should look at is also those reporting lines of women's football sections. So rather than the teams that perform better generally have a general manager for women's football that reports directly to the CEO of a club, and they're not buried under many levels of hierarchy in order to get to that decision-making person, or they sit on the board or are an advisor to the board of the club. And I think that's something that's slowly changing. But if that changes, then it's a good sign for the women's game.
That's a good point, Natalia. When you look at what's happening at Valencia, how is that reporting structure of the men's and the women's game different or similar? What do you see at Valencia?
I don't understand your question, please. Can you repeat?
So does the head of the women's game report directly into the Secretary General or the CEO? And does the head of the men's game also report directly into the CEO? Or is it a little bit different?
We have the same structure above. For example, we have two research teams in men's and women, and we have the same situation in our daily environment. Yes, the culture of the country are direction in one way, but inside of the Valencia CF we are working about the same structure, about the same technical director also, that they are gating or managing the both pathway. But obviously we have a specific environment in women because we are in different teams. From the technical and tactical content until the business environment. So inside of the both structure, we have a specific pathway where we are working. But at the meantime, the big area is the same for the both gender.
Great. Anthony, I'm going to come back to you, please, and I want to pick up on that point that Emma noted, that specifically in Europe, UEFA has noticed that within football, uniquely within football, there doesn't seem to be as strong an exchange of knowledge in the technical area as there is, for example, in rugby. So again, Anthony, you've worked across both the men's game and the women's game in India. Have you seen the same thing? Can you ensure that is not the same thing? Can you ensure that the transfer of knowledge is well supported in the women's game in India?
As I said, the game is same, okay? It's just the people who are working, the perspectives are different. So I think we should not consider that. And the people who are, that's why I said in the first thing only, that we should have people who are technician in that work, okay? And that will help to grow the women's football.
Okay, so it's not a problem that you foresee in India. This could also be because both the men's sport and the women's sport is not as developed. So if the men's game had perhaps been more developed, we might have seen some of those inequalities. Would you suggest that's the case?
I think women's football can also develop like how the men's football has been doing. I think women's football has been doing really well in Indian football. Yes, the pace is a little slow. But again, we need good people to work with the women's team, and I think we will reach at the earliest.
So here's a question then. They're both developing, albeit the women's game is developing at a slower pace. Do you think the women's game can benefit from learning from any mistakes that the men's game might have made, for example? Anthony, do you think that there are any mistakes that might have been made in the men's game that the women's game can benefit from?
Benefit in women's football, right? So I think women's football, the number of women's players what we have are less at the moment. So there's a lot of benefit for the women to play for our country. Whereas if you see the men's football, we have a lot of men who are who are really working hard to be in the national team. So that is there. But if the women's now the leagues are being growing, there are a lot of number of teams are coming. There are 2 teams now newly added in from the ISL side. So there is no number of more teams. There will be number of more players coming up. So that's the only thing at the moment in India. But as I said, women's development is happening. The women's are growing, and I'm sure in coming years they will do it better.
Excellent, thank you. Trisha, we're going to come back to you now. Emma and Natalia and I, we can't see the audience at the conference, so we can't actually see the presence of females in the audience. I don't know what the split is between male and female over there. Perhaps you can tell us a bit about that. And more importantly, do you have any advice for women who are currently working in football in India?
Yes, my advice is based on... sorry.
Yes, please go ahead, Patricia. Thank you.
Okay. My advice is to believe in themselves, working hard, studying a lot as much as possible, and having the support of their families, because I think that it's quite important. But when I say studying a lot, I say not only typical study education, I say also develop soft skills or develop the leadership skills, because they will need it. If there is some in any moment they need additional help, ask for that. And the main part, believe in themselves. I think it's the most important, because they will find many barriers in society, so they will to fight them. So it's very important to be confident with themselves.
Excellent, thank you, Patricia. Emma, I'd like to come back to you, please. Anthony's just told us that the growth of the women's game in India is a little bit slower than the men's. Why don't you tell the audience, please, about what you've seen when it comes to the growth of the women's game through the European countries that you've worked with?
Yeah, so I've been working at UEFA and in European football for over a decade now. And when I think about every single facet, I would say, of the women's game has evolved and changed in every corner of Europe. For us, we see the biggest growth in the women's game. And I don't always want to compare with the men's game, but it is growing at a faster rate in terms of participation, in terms of fan interest, in terms of its outlook. So for us, it's definitely the biggest opportunity to grow football. I think we found out, we have a study at the moment that says 1 in 3 fans that are fans of the women's game are new to football. So that's showing that, people are coming into the sport through women's football. Its participation rates, maybe I just said it 5 times faster in girls and women's football than in the men's game. But so we have seen a huge seismic shift in Europe at every level. But what the biggest kind of change for me is definitely about how, especially in the last 3 years, is the doors to discussions on the women's game have opened up, which were previously closed. Women's football had been seen as a tax before, but really it's seen as a viable investment opportunity. It's seen as having huge benefits for society, and there is little to little resistance to developing it, investing it, and ultimately providing kind of opportunities and support into the game. So from a UEFA perspective, I think from a European perspective, for sure, it's the biggest growth area we have, and I'm pretty sure that's the case in nearly all other areas of the globe as well.
Fantastic. That's a great note to start drawing this panel to a close on. We've got 10 minutes left. So I'm just going to go around the panelists again. Anthony, and to end on as well. What's the best advice you could give to anyone in the audience who's responsible for setting up or managing the women's sport in an existing club? What's the best advice you could give to them?
Don't be impatient to achieve the results. I think that the most important is be proactive in the action to promote the development toward the goal. So enjoy the process. I know that maybe it's too hard for the people are working in the women, but whether the step are big or small, the most important thing is to build a solid standard around of you, where we improve the player development and educate their skills to be better player, but also better person.
Thank you very much indeed. Emma, I'm going to come over to you with the same sort of question, but I'd like you to put it into perspective with the hosting of the FIFA Women's World Cup, Under-17 World Cup. What advice would you give to the organisers, the local organising committee? I know it's only in a month's time, so they probably can't change anything now, but what advice would you give?
I think that it would be very much about being bold in your actions now at this point. Make decisions and follow them through from beginning to end, and also show that you as an organising committee kind of really believes that this tournament will have a lasting impact. But it's really now about being bold in the actions that you put forward.
Fantastic. And we look forward to seeing how India takes on Emma's advice and makes bold decisions. Okay, we're going to go round with one final last question. And it is a question I like to leave panelists with. Let's see how comfortable you are answering it. Patricia, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us about one mistake you might have made as a woman in sport that you wish you could go back and change? This will be a great learning opportunity for the audience.
I have many mistakes, and it has been learning for me. I think that it's when I have a mistake is the point in which I learn more, so it's okay. But I can remember one situation when the board of directors in Eibar was appointed me as general manager. My first thought in that moment that I was not prepared for that, that I didn't deserve that. So I invite to the following women that are in the same situation to train themselves, not thinking in this way. In that moment, I decide to start training with a coach. I continue training with that coach, and it's one of the best from a mistake. Took a decision in correct way. So my advice is to don't think in that way. But always from mistake you can learn a lot.
Excellent, thank you. Anthony, sir, the same question over to you to end your participation in this panel. Can you tell us about one mistake you might have made in the women's game that the audience would benefit from learning from?
You can always make mistake, whether it's football or another part. But we should learn from a mistake. That is the big thing. But if one change, if I get that again an opportunity, it will be where everyone is talking about the telecast for the women's game as well. A better telecast, because that helps to grow and to improve football in the women's development also. So I would say the proper broadcast and telecast will be a great addition to the women's football.
Excellent, thank you. Natalia, can we ask you to be so brave and tell us as well a mistake that you might have made that you would wish you could go back and change in your career in the women's game?
Thank you so much.
Sorry? Can you hear me, Natalia? Can you hear me, Natalia? No? Okay. Emma, can we go over to you, please? Are you comfortable with sharing with us a mistake that you might have made that you've learnt from?
I think at the very beginning of starting to work with the national associations across Europe, I think maybe I was a little bit naive in the importance of having the very top people in the association really believe in the development of the women's game, and how without them you really can't make the same level of change that you can with them.
That's a great piece of advice there. I think we've managed to get Natalia back. I think Natalia might have had a problem with the connection. Natalia, just for a closing question, are you able to wish the audience the best of luck?
I'm sorry, I think I have a little bit trouble with the connection. So I love
Don't
you.
worry.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Natalia, for joining us back into the panel. As we say, thank you very much to all the panelists. That's Anthony, Patricia, Emma and Natalia. I hope you in the audience have enjoyed listening to their words and have benefited from their advice and their knowledge. Thank you very much indeed, and enjoy the rest of the Global Soccer Conclave.
Across the globe, women in sports are taking huge strides forward. Here's hoping the women in sports grow. May they lead, breaking one signal, one stereotype at a time, and inspiring millions in the process. Thank you to all our panelists. A big round of applause for them.